So, welcome to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm Catherine Tomlinson and I started an eco conscious pottery company called Oxford Clay. Now, at Oxford Clay, I don't just make pottery, I also make resources such as books and courses and information for other potters who want to be more eco-conscious in their pottery practice but maybe don't know where to start or can't find out the information they need. So that's what this podcast is all about. It's about sharing everything I've learned along my eco-conscious pottery journey with you, and I can't wait to get started. So let's go. Hello, welcome back to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm Catherine Tomlinson, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about making a pottery glaze, a stoneware pottery glaze from leaves. So, this might seem a really strange concept if you've never sort of um, like heard me talking about this before. But basically, I've been spending the last kind of 4 years experimenting with ash glazing, and the last 2 years I've been experimenting specifically with ash glazes made with the leaves of plants that have fallen naturally. Um, so the idea about this is that plants have leaves that they no longer need as part of their growing cycle. You know, maybe it's an evergreen plant that kind of sheds leaves kind of as and when it doesn't need them anymore, or perhaps it's a deciduous plant that sheds them all at once in the autumn or fall. Um, and as potters, we can collect these leaves and actually make them into a pottery glaze. And what we do is we make them into the ash, and then we can mix that ash and make it as part of like a pottery glaze recipe. So that's the basic. That's the basic principle, what I'm going to be talking to you about today. And I wanted to just go through with you how you actually make a pottery glaze from fallen leaves. So I've actually written a whole book about this called Leaf Ash Glazing, A Guide to Sustainable Pottery Glazing with Fallen Leaves. So all of this information is in that book, but I thought it'd be really cool to do some podcast episodes on it. So just so you kind of like, just so I can describe to you basically the kind of basic principles of making an ash glaze from fallen leaves, just so you can see if it's something that you might want to try. Yeah, it's a very exciting world of glazing because when you glaze with plant ashes, each plant is totally unique in terms of like its mineral and trace metal composition because it's if those things are affected by like the soil it's grown in, the climatic conditions it's grown in, the species of plant. Might be growing next to something with various things that will contaminate the soil. It might be in a polluted area, which may affect how what kind of ends up in that ash glaze. So it's a really, really exciting area of pottery, and you can create like incredible unique glazes from plant ashes and from leaves of plants in particular. Okay, so let's start with the first part of like where you even start, like what is happening, where can you even start in terms of like making a glaze from fallen leaves. So when you're working with ash, it's really important to protect your lungs and your eyes and your skin from ash because it's caustic. So it can harm your skin if you let it touch your skin. It can harm your eyes, and you definitely don't want to be breathing it in. So wearing an FFP3 face mask is really important when working with ash, just like it is when you're making any kind of glazes, any when you're working with any kind of like powdered rocks or powdered clays, you definitely don't want to be breathing those in. So yeah, just the same as that when you're working with ash, wear an FFP3 face mask. That's the lowest level of protection that you need when working with pottery dusts of the various kinds. And then when you're working with ash as well, it's a great idea to wear goggles to protect your eyes, with a seal around. And also, yeah, don't let the ash touch your skin. So if you're going to be touching it with your hands, definitely wear gloves. Or you can just use implements like, say, like a silicone spatula or a spoon to kind of scoop up the ash. But yeah, don't let it be touching your eyes, your skin, or your lungs, and then you'll be totally safe when working with ash. Okay, so the absolute first step is to identify the plant that you're using. So, like I said to you, so you can make it from, evergreen plants that drop their leaves, at different times of the year. You can make ash glazes from deciduous plants that will drop their leaves like all in one go in the autumn. You can make it from any type of plant that drops its leaves, and I'm recommending that you use leaves that have like dropped naturally from a plant, because we don't want to be really like picking leaves off an alive plant, because they need those leaves, to survive. They need them for photosynthesis. They'll also be much wetter, so they're not as good for glazing. You'll have to dry them a lot longer. So it's really good idea just to use fallen leaves. Fallen leaves make excellent glazes, and they're already dry, pretty dry. So yeah, so that's what we want. The first thing we want to do is to identify the plant, and the reason we want to do that is because we want to know that the plant like isn't poisonous. Because some plants can give off like toxic fumes if you burn them. Some plants are poisonous, like, so you kind of don't want to get them on your hands and stuff. So the main methods that I use to identify plants are a book that I got at the library on like trees and shrubs identification, and you can also use the kind of various like different like plant identification apps that you can use, or you can also use. I use sometimes Google Lens, which is a really cool thing where you can basically search the internet for a photo that you've taken. So sometimes I take a photo of the leaf, or there's a photo of the whole plant, and then I search for it with Google Lens, which you can just do like on a smartphone, and then it brings up images that are like similar to that plant, similar to that image, and then you can see, oh, okay, like it might be on a gardening website or something. You're like, oh, okay, that's that plant. But yeah, certainly like plant identification books are really, really good. You can get ones that are like extremely comprehensive about like sort of all the different trees, maybe in your sort of like region of the world. Um, yeah, so okay, so we've identified the plant, we know what it is. The next step is to wait until that plant drops its leaves. So this is probably why this book has taken me like a couple of years to write, because um, it's been quite a long process of like identifying different plants and then like waiting for their growing cycle to sort of complete, and then they drop their leaves. So you might identify it. It's quite good to identify plants, say like in the spring and summer, when they have like they might be flowering, so it helps you to identify them. It helps you when the leaves are green, or you can really see all the different aspects of the plant. Maybe it's fruiting as well. So different times of the year will give you different clues as to the identity of that plant, but then you you need to wait for it to drop its leaves, at the end of its natural growing cycle. Usually kind of like, autumn in the UK, we have like a big leaf fall where like loads of plants, loads of deciduous trees like drop their leaves kind of, from kind of September to maybe like early December. And all those leaves are like all over the place, in the park, on the pavement. So there are loads of different places that you can collect leaves. So it's important to say at this stage probably that although like like fallen leaves are naturally like they're part of they're a really important part of like habitat for animals and habitat for insects, and the ecology of an ecosystem. As potters, if we're like careful collecting leaves and we're just collecting what we need, we're checking for insects when we're collecting those leaves. We're not taking too many. We're not trampling over, other habitats whilst we're collecting those leaves. Is going to be a relatively sustainable thing for us to be doing, to be collecting leaves from the environment. So we're not taking like all the leaves. We're just taking what we need to make glazes. And like I said, when you collect the leaves, just be super careful you're not collecting like accidentally like insects or like little worms that might be. If you're collecting them on a wet day, there might be slugs, worms, snails in with those leaves. So Yeah, like I always sort of check each leaf before I collect it, and try and collect them on a dry day. It's kind of less likely for you to be collecting those invertebrates when you're collecting your leaves. So we've identified them. We've kind of found a good patch of leaves. We've collected them. We've checked for insects. I just collect them in a bag. Just obviously make sure that you have permission to collect the leaves wherever you're collecting them from. Like I was saying, quite a lot of leaves in the UK just kind of like end up in public spaces, just kind of like on the pavement and stuff. And that's where I collected a lot of the leaves for this book on leaf ash glazing. A lot of them were just collected from sort of public areas where leaves are like naturally kind of blowing into. Um, so the next step is to sort out the leaves into the types of leaves. So you might have collected leaves, say like, from the pavement or something, and there might be a few different types in there. So um, the thing I was doing when I was making this book was I was laying them out on like a white cloth or light colored surface and just sorting them out as soon as I collected them, to try and just like ascertain which was which type, because this book I tested each type individually for its own species in terms of like wanting to see like the resulting glaze that each one made. So it's a really good idea to sort your leaves out. If you want to say like, make the glaze again, it's a great idea just to be using like one type of leaf, or you could try sort of mixing different types of leaves kind of later on, once you know what like one type of leaf looks like as a glaze. After that you can start like experimenting wildly with like different types of leaf ash and stuff. So that's what we want initially, maybe just to have each type of leaf sorted out. We know what we're doing, like we know what we're burning, we know what type of leaf it is, and we can tell what type of glaze it's going to make. So the next stage is super important, and that's to dry the leaves really, really well. So although leaves that are falling from trees and plants will probably be very dry when they're, because the plant will be be taking that moisture out, like all the kind of goodness out of the leaves, and then they fall. And so they are generally quite dry when you collect them, but we want to dry them really, really well because we don't want to be burning wet leaves. So the next step is to just dry them super, super, super well. And I was literally drying them maybe for like even a couple of months to make sure they're extremely dry. Um, so once the leaves are extremely dry, the next part of the process is to burn them into an ash. So when you're burning anything into an ash, you just got to be really super careful that you're not breathing in like any of the fumes, any of the smoke that you're when you're burning things. So you could use an FFP3 face mask. Can burn it in a very, very well ventilated area. You never want to be doing fires in an enclosed space because it can create kind of carbon monoxide. And so you really need to be burning things in like a well ventilated space, because carbon monoxide is very harmful to human health. So you need to be burning them in a very well ventilated space, and you really want a kind of day which is like very still, because if you're trying to burn leaves into ash and it's windy, that ash is just going to be like blowing around. It's very light. Like ash is like could just kind of go into oblivion, and you'll never see that ash again. And you need to contain all the ash you can from those leaves, yeah, to be able to make your glaze. Okay, so I usually use a kind of garden incinerator to burn my leaves in, and I just loosely pack them in the garden incinerator. I don't really push them down. I just kind of just pile them in. Sometimes I weigh the leaves before. So like for this book, I weighed every single leaf out. Um, because I wanted to know exactly how much ash was produced by the dry weight of the leaves before they were burned. And that would sort of help me understand how many leaves I needed to collect before, to create the amount of glaze I wanted. And I wanted to like pass that information on to you as well. So I made a table actually in the book, Leaf Ash Glazing, which has got every single leaf, how heavy it was before it was burned, and then how much ash, the weight of the ash that was produced from the fire. So yeah, it's at this stage that you could weigh your leaves just before burning. But I burn them in a garden incinerator, and just leaves burn very well. So you don't really need to use any kind of additional kind of fire lighters, or you don't need to use kind of paper to set it alight. Really, leaves just kind of generally burn when you set them light. They kind of just burn quite well. And just be like obviously, yeah, obviously goes without saying, but like just be like really careful with the fire and stuff, in terms of like some leaves can burn very vigorously. There's been leaves I've burned before, specifically ones which are kind of quite like shiny. I don't know whether that's kind of something about like shiny leaves, or maybe they have oils in or something, but some of those leaves have burned very strongly and vigorously quite quickly, and it can take you by surprise. So it's a great idea to use a garden incinerator, because it will kind of keep you really safe. Often they have like lids which kind of funnel the fire kind of out of the funnel, and then they have like holes throughout it, and they're suitable material as well. They're usually made from sort of stainless steel, so they're really, yeah, they're really good to use. Mine's just like a 15-liter one, so it's quite a small one. Yeah, and you can just light the leaves in there, and then they burn away. And then you let all of that cool, and once it's cool, you're left with an ash, which is our essential ingredient into our leaf ash pottery glaze. So you can collect the ash from the incinerator, just kind of scoop it into like a jar or something. Like I said, when it's cool, otherwise it can like crack the jar. So yeah, just scoop it into a jar or some kind of suitable container, and then label it. It's a really good idea to label it so that you know exactly what ash that is in your pot, so that you can replicate it again. It's really, really nice to be able to be like, oh, okay, well, that's that leaf, and I know exactly what it is, and then I can make it again. If you really love that glaze, because some of the glazes are really beautiful that are made with leaf ashes. Um, okay, so that's how we get to our ash from, initially identifying leaves. There's one other step which you need to do before making it into an actual glaze, and that is to sieve the ash. So sometimes when you burn leaves, you're kind of left with like kind of bits of kind of maybe larger bits of leaf that like haven't burned properly. And in that case, you can sieve the ash with a 60 mesh sieve. So I got a 60 mesh sieve just off the internet. It was like a catering sieve, which I think was meant to be used for like flour. That's a really good sieve to use. It's quite wide mesh. That's quite good to just kind of like initially sieve the ash, and that kind of gets the big bits out. But what you really want to do is then sieve it with 100 mesh size sieve. And what I found was, so I've experimented with various ways of doing this, and various different kind of mesh sizes to sieve with. And what I found is that 100 mesh size is a really good size to sieve ash through, because you'll get a very, very smooth glaze, and it will make sure that you don't get any grit in your ash glaze. Because quite often when you're collecting leaves, say like if you're collecting them off the road or something, or collecting them, I don't know, in a park or something, you might get soil on them. When you burn those leaves, the soil will like stay in the ash, and you really want to kind of remove that grit, because it will make a gritty glaze for your pot. And you might get like bits of grit like on the glaze, and you want a really lovely like smooth shiny glaze. And so sieving it with 100 mesh sieve is a really, really brilliant way of like just making that glaze like really beautifully smooth. It also kind of really mixes the ash really well. So you tend to get like more kind of speckles in glazes if you sieve them with a bigger mesh, with a 60 mesh. And then if you sieve it with 100 mesh, that glaze is a much more kind of even toned glaze. That's what I found through my own experiments. Yeah, okay. So once you've sieved it through 100 mesh sieve, which I basically just do by putting the 100 mesh sieve, which I got from just off the internet again, and you can buy various mesh sizes, and the 100 mesh size is perfect, and it's a metal one. Basically put that over a bowl, and I just use a silicone spatula, which I just got from the supermarket, and I just kind of gently like push the ash through. And it does take quite a long time. It does, like sieving ash does take a long time. It is a real labor of love, but you'll be left with this absolutely beautiful ash powder that then you can make into a pottery glaze. Okay, so in the next episode, I'm going to be telling you all about how to actually make the glaze, but that was initially like how to actually get your beautiful ash as a glazing ingredient from leaves that you've found, identified and found, and dried and burned. And yeah, so join me on the next episode when we'll be talking about how to actually make the ash glaze, and yeah, and fire it. And I'm really looking forward to telling you all about that. So I'll see you next time. Happy potting until then. And yeah, if you want to know more information about leaf ash glazing, it's all in the leaf ash glazing book, which is available from the Oxford Clay website as a PDF, or you can also get like a paper copy from Amazon. That's yeah, it's available on Amazon. So yeah, I'll see you soon on the next episode. And until then, wishing you very, very happy potting. And yeah. Oh, yeah. So I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you're interested to learn more about eco conscious pottery or making your pottery more eco conscious and sustainable, there's so much for you on the Oxford Clay website, which is www.oxfordclay.co.uk. I can't wait to see you there.